Hello YouTube, this is Golden E-Man1 here, and today we're going to be having a discussion on faction diversity. So before we dive into this discussion, some of you may be asking what faction diversity is. There is no set definition, but in essence, faction diversity is the differences between each faction that makes them unique. What sets them apart are their weapons, vehicles, cosmetics, and more. When we break it down, we have the Terran Republic, who focus on firing as much bullets as they can and have an emphasis on speed. The new Congrolmete are a group of funded rebels who focus on dealing the most damage whilst being able to take a punch. And finally, the Vanu Sovereignty are the most technologically advanced faction, using Vanu artifacts to make them the most agile and accurate. The main differences between the factions are shown within their weapons and vehicles, but all factions have access to Nanite System tech such as the Galaxy and the NS-15M. However, I'm starting to get the feel that there's been too much development into Nanite System tech and especially weapons. Now don't get me wrong, because they do fill the gap that each faction naturally has with their faction traits, but it gets to a point where it's too much and the useful NS weapons could have been made faction specific. For example, let's take a look at the NS-AM7 Archer, an anti-material rifle dedicated to the engineer class to further its abilities with dealing against vehicles and maxes. Whilst you shouldn't expect it to do significant damage to vehicles, you can expect it to be a nuisance to drivers and the pilots. Moreover, landing a shot on a max will often send them running into cover since it does so much damage to them. But what if they were faction specific? The VS variant could work on a charge mechanism similar to the Vortex for the max. The TR version could be a 2 or 3 round burst rifle, and the NC could have a single shot one, a bit like the NS version we have now. These are just a rough idea of what they could be like. The traits of each faction are also represented through their vehicles being the main battle tank and Empire specific fighters. However, why is it that only 2 out of 10 vehicles are faction specific? In my opinion, the biggest setback about the game is that all factions have access to most of the same vehicles. We have had the release of the Valkyrie, which could have been faction specific. The Harasser and the Flash could follow similar models to the ones on screen right now. Although they look really great, it's far too late to develop these models since players have bought cosmetics and they won't be transferable onto different models. It would be awesome if all the vehicles of each faction were different. The VS would have their hover technology or something similar on theirs, the TR would have the fastest and most mobile vehicles, and the NC would have vehicles that are strong and hard hitting. By encouraging and developing more faction specific vehicles and weapons, we give players more of a reason to pick one faction over the other. So why do we have so much Nanite System tech and less faction specific tech? Well, one of the reasons for this is mainly due to time. Time will need to be spent into creating concepts, art, animations, and more for each faction. In addition to this, after release, a lot of time will need to be spent in balancing the weapon or the vehicle and making sure they excel in one field but fall in another. When all the tweaks are done, something else might be released, which could mean the developers need to go back to those weapons or vehicles and balance them again. But through the involvement of the community through the player studio, we have seen some great cosmetics such as the armors and helmets available to buy. There are also some faction specific cosmetics for the Nanite System vehicles. So what can we do about faction diversity? Well, for starts, I believe it's worth mentioning that there are a lot of areas that could be expanded upon. Around December, we saw some faction-specific Sundra weapons, which could still be in development, and Rel did mention that new faction-specific weapons are in the works, but we can presume for more information to be given out closer to the time. But we do have a small idea of what's to come. As of recent, this picture was released, and other than the change in the skybox and the orbital strikes, you can see a new TR Top Gunner weapon. The picture was also given the hashtag of critical mass and continent lock-in. So it looks like we may get new Top Gunner weapons for each of the factions, which is a great thing to see. As a quick side note, if you'd like to download the public test server and see potentially new add-ons to the game, there'll be a link in the description explaining the policies and how to download it. As mentioned previously, a lot of time is spent into making the art and models for new weapons and vehicles. So to save time, we could get the player studio community involved by allowing them to submit weapons and vehicle models for any potential faction specific gear coming out. There are also some areas within the arsenals of each faction where I think faction specific weapons could be added. At the moment, Maxes only have 2 weapons to deal with air, being the NS-20 Gorgons and the NS-10 Bursters. Why not give some faction specific weapons for them? The Light Assault got their rocket rifles, and there could be a potential whole new range of faction specific weapons made there, just the same way the Heavy Assault has a range of rocket launchers. We could even go from the very small stuff like making something minor such as faction specific grenades or implants to the very big stuff such as vehicles. With the Combined Arms initiative currently on the way, wouldn't now be a great time to introduce a new vehicle? Maybe a new gunship that has more guns than a Liberator and will require more players to man it? Maybe a vehicle to replace the option for pulling battle ants, or even a beastly Colossus tank that runs on Cortium and is as deadly as 3 main battle tanks. We've seen the prototype tanks on the PTS with a new alert attached to them. Everything to do with it is still up in the air, but why don't we make these prototype tanks faction specific? The story behind it could be to do with the factions trying to harness more power from hives or Cortium, and have these experimental techs they want to test on the battlefield. And hey, maybe they don't even need to be prototypes, and they could just be official vehicles. Or does it even have to be a tank? What about harnessing the power of a hive or a Cortium to make a new aerial vehicle, or even a Bastion fleet carrier? But in essence, I would like to see the next weapons or vehicles being released to be faction specific and improve faction diversity. Let's add more reason to choose one faction over another and give some more flair and taste into each faction. So what do you guys think about faction diversity, and what are your thoughts around this topic? Why not leave those thoughts in the comment section down below. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, why not smash that like button? And if you're new to the channel, why not subscribe to receive some more golden quality content. But nonetheless guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace.